Okay, and we're live. Greetings and welcome to my channel. We're going to be talking about the Psychonaut today and the Rites of Chaos. Give everybody some time to catch up to us here. If you're watching this after the live, you can skip ahead about 10 minutes and we'll actually be getting into it, but I need to give everyone just a bit of time to catch up to us. Hey, Black Unigriffin, glad to see you. We're doing the Rites of Chaos today. I feel like my the thumbnail is pretty cool today. It's an altered picture of a picture from the Hubble telescope. I just gave it 4 extra points to make it a chaos star. Yeah, I thought so. It was fun. I've done other stuff with it in the past, but this is the first time I finally made it a chaos star. Good evening, Romstead. Good to see you. Starting off with some wine tonight. Hey, Ricky. Okay. Let's see here. We're up to 6 people. All right, we're starting to get there. Hello. Like I said, I'm starting off with wine tonight. Then we'll move into a red ale and then some ciders. But that's not the important bit. Nobody cares what I'm drinking. Had someone comment on the last live afterwards that I would be more professional if I didn't drink during the lives. But I was like, who's a professional? This is chaos magic. I actually haven't commented yet, but that was my immediate thoughts. Professional? Who's a professional? Professional chaos mage. That's like an oxymoron, I think. Okay, so I should have told the people listening afterwards to skip ahead 3 minutes instead of 10, but they'll figure out. Hello, my love. It may have been said out of love. I mean, they said they did seem to like the video. They just said that I would be more professional if I wasn't drinking. And I mean, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. By the end of the lives, I do get a bit slurred, but part of what we're here for is at least what I'm here for is to enjoy myself. And this is one of the times that I allow myself to drink. Anyways, so let's start at the beginning. The Rites of Chaos. There's a lot going on here, especially with this first bit. Talks about the 5 rites, which are what the heck are they? They are the Mass of Chaos, Initiation, Ordination, Exorcism, and Extreme Unction. Which Extreme Unction is basically like last rites, essentially. This whole bit here is kind of essentially the idea of priesthood and initiation within chaos magic. That's the way I took it. I did like how he was talking about the initiation should be different for each initiate. I think there is a very good point to that. is given as the right to complete process. Each of these rights is given in a general form for adaptation as circumstance demands. Each may be performed by a single operator or by an unlimited number of participants and assistants. That's not the part I wanted to read. Oh. The right of initiation. No. No rights are given for the creation of adepts or masters, for each seeker must devise his own entrance into these grades and await the recognition of his peers. I found that interesting because, like I've said many times while teaching magic, first off, it's like teaching an art. It's like teaching painting. I can tell you quite a bit about how to move the brush. I can even tell you what colors look good together. I, however, cannot teach you to paint. I mean, the first bit, that's it's a metaphor. I couldn't teach you how to paint, period. But it's the same with magic. I can teach you how to perform certain things. I can teach you how things work. But you have to find it in yourself. You have to find that in you so that magic works. That's how we make it actually work, is by finding our personal position within the pattern and what works and resonates for us. So, I cannot teach you to cast spells. I can simply teach you the mechanics, spellcraft. And that's kind of what he's saying here without saying that. He doesn't get quite that into it. Okay, the mass of chaos. This was an interesting bit. Oh, hey, Gavin. Glad to see you. I'm doing very well. I actually caught last live I was talking about having caught a lingcod. I caught another one yesterday. So that was pretty exciting. Actually caught it right on the edge of the bank there. And managed to pull it up before Felix got the net over there, which I shouldn't have done. I should have just waited for the net instead of risked it like that. But I got the fish out. And then we forgot the net or the bucket, so I had to put it in a tide pool. But that worked out all right. Anyways. Okay. So this massive chaos, he talks about the invocation of Baphomet. And it says 5 different parts. 6 parts. Preparation, statement of intent, invocation of chaos, invocation of Baphomet, oath, and closing. And I find that interesting because you've got, the same kind of things like when I list out the mechanics of spellcraft. You got your statement of intent, invocation of Baphomet, and invocation of chaos. These are basically charging. The oath and closing, which would be your release part of the spell. So you have intent. I guess invocation of chaos and invocation would be form, charge. I don't know. It's not quite the same, but it's on a similar mode. Preparation is very important for any spell work. And it's actually an area where I find myself struggle sometimes. Like I'll have everything ready. And the problem is a lot of times what I'm doing, I'll go in with a certain intent. And the intent remains the same. But often when I go about things with the way my magic works, something may come up halfway through the spell that I wasn't prepared for. And I'm like, all of a sudden I'm over here searching through a drawer. Or maybe I just literally forgot that I needed to grab a thing because I have horrible object permanence. But preparation is very important. And not just to have the things that you want, yeah? It's also part of the spell. It really is part of the ritual, not just the being prepared, but the thinking on what you're going to do. He talks a little bit later about magical time, which I think I was actually supposed to read next week, but I accidentally skipped ahead some. But in that, he talks about setting things up for the right time of day and deciding when you're going to do something. What he doesn't mention in that, I mean, the timing, astrological significance, time of season, moon phases, these all matter. But also, the prep itself is where the spell actually begins. When you decide what things you're going to do to prepare, what it is that you want to do. This is part of it because there is where the information, the mental plane aspect of the spell begins, is with your deciding what you want to do and how you're going to go about it. This lines things up, not just on the physical by getting the things you need, but also on the mental plane by knowing what the plan is. And it begins forming and weaving from the moment you begin conceiving of the ritual. Sometimes you will even begin to see effects of a ritual before you cast it because of this effect. And then, of course, after you have preparation, then you have the actual enacting of the spell. Enacting, not enacting. I always have trouble with that. But anyways, um, like I said, the preparation is a big part of it, and then you have the actual enacting of the spell. And I'm gonna stay on the preparation just a little bit longer because this is also very important as you're setting up. You should be putting everything. I've got to do a speech, man. Like, just a moment. Um, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Oh yeah. So when you're doing the preparation, it's important that it be treated like a tea ceremony type thing. A lot of the times, right? You put the athame in just the right place. You put the wand in just the right place. You This helps us get into gnosis. I've got to do a speech next month at our local pagan moot about sigil magic, and I'm nervous as I have a bit of social anxiety. I can talk to folk, but standing up and talking is hard for me. Um, that is something where actually you could even discuss it in the talk about you can make a sigil to help you with that social anxiety, with that problem of standing up before a crowd and speaking. Yeah. Make a sigil. I don't want to give you your statement of intent, but make a sigil of something on along the lines of I can speak before a crowd without getting nervous. And then you can make the sigil and actually, even since the lecture is about sigil work, you can release the sigil by speaking of it during the talk itself. And not only will this help with your nervousness, it's going to give people um it's going to cause people to give you a little bit of leeway by confessing that you have this problem. So not only should this sigil itself be psychologically successful in this endeavor, but it will also, just it being there and being spoken about will give you something to talk about during the talk, and it will also have an effect on the people around you. Ah, your voice gets jittery. Well, Um, you could stick with that in the statement of intent, put something with that in there. But um, I used to stutter real bad. It's probably a bit late for this advice, but how I got my stuttering to stop, I got my tongue pierced, and it caused a beginning or an end, new beginning point to my speech. And I did a lot of magic on it about having a silver tongue with the barbell. But ultimately, it's just that sense memory of now I'm learning to talk all over again. And as you can tell, I don't stutter much these days. When we talk about voices being jittery or talk about my stuttering, sometimes it does still pick up. But you could use some kind of sense memory. Yeah, self hypnosis is another way to go, which you could use with the Silva method, like Black Unigryffindor is describing here. Or I have several videos on pendulum self hypnosis that you can take a look at. Those are pretty easy to enact. The pendulum creates a great hack for controlling the subconscious mind. Trouble with it is if you use it for hypnosis and you get used to the idea that you can control the pendulum, because that's what it's about. It's about tricking your subconscious mind, right? Like this will work even. This is just a chain, but you hold it in front of you, and then you just tell it to move in a circle without consciously doing so. Now, if you look at my arm, you'll see that my hand actually is doing that. I'm not consciously making the decision. It's my subconscious taking a command from my conscious mind. And take it from there. But I'm not going to get deep into the pendulum self hypnosis today because that's not the topic. But that's the basis of it. With that, you can make your subconscious mind take commands. And yes, it is very much a power dynamic. And when you go to speak, that's an important thing to remember is the people are there because they want to hear from you. Yeah. For me, that's the biggest thing. I've never had much trouble with public speaking myself. It's just it's easier for me. Like talking to people one on one individual used to be really hard for me. We talked about that actually in the last live about how to have small talk. I had to take all kinds of classes in becoming a salesman and actually some neuro linguistic programming. And then after all of that, still wound up had to wind up being a member of a family that was very prominent in a very small town in Lubeck. I moved up there and was buying fish with them for a while. So then everybody wanted to talk to me. Everybody knew who I was, and I was forced to break that seal and learn how to talk to people because everywhere I went, everyone was going to talk to me. Indeed. I'm good. I want to read that one out loud so it can be preserved for the live. When you get a feel for the power dynamic situation of public speaking, at some point you can find a flow and you get charged from the attention of people. You can just feel it and surf that flow. This is very good advice. Um, especially with the uh ghost tours that I've been doing. There's that flow that it takes on. Oh, this is surprised I didn't lead with this. There's also the idea of wearable tulpa. Like you simply make a version of yourself that can do public speaking, and then step into that tulpa as you go up on stage. Now, I suppose part of the reason that didn't immediately come to mind is because wearable tulpas like that, they do take repetition in use, and it sounds like this is something that's going to be fairly soon. So I think the sigil thing would be cool. Of course, it's up to you what you do in the end, but I think that would work out because it would also give you something to talk about during the speech. Anyways, invocation to Baphomet. And this is, I don't know. It's one of them things where I'm like, does this guy really understand Baphomet? But I feel like a lot of people, I mean, I don't know if I fully understand the whole Baphomet thing. It's not something I personally spend a lot of time on. Still, hey, Max. Now the spirit, yes. Um, the name of that gourd right now is technically Gordon, but I've never really put much into it. We'll see what happens with that. Oh no, that's perfectly fine, Gavin. I That's part of what the lives are for, is to discuss things like that. don't apologize at all. It did take me out of what I was saying for a minute, but that's okay because, like I said, that's part of what these lives are for, is to be able for me to be able to answer questions and help people with stuff in a real time on a real time dynamic. Yeah, so I noticed I actually did say the name of that being at least once during the last live. I'm like, I'm not gonna say the name, but at one point I actually did. But anyways, the gourd is actually, if you go back in my lives, I grew a face. Like I strapped a mask to a gourd and grew that in there. And it's one of the gourds from the original Psalm Onesabin project, or it's one the seeds from one of the gourds of the one of the original Psalm Onesabin projects. So that is a child of that Gordon is a child of hope. Okay, so yeah, we're the Baphomet thing. I Baphomet is the representation of the terrestrial life current. Appears as a horned, theriomorphic deity of androgynous winged reptilian, mammalian, and human aspect. The priest arouses within himself a resurgence of chi at the Kundalini or sacred fire snake, as it is variously known. That's a pretty good innuendo there, sacred fire snake. I kind of like that. But it is, that is a proper term for the Kundalini. Kundalini. The obscene kiss to the devil's hindquarters has been misunderstood. So yeah, they're talking about blowing on the, well, the taint, um to evoke this energy, which is supposedly where the oh, well, that's supposedly where that particular chakra is directly located. There I go talking with the glass in front of my face again. That is essentially where that particular chakra is essentially located. But I mean, I can't help but giggle at the idea of got someone else there, someone standing there, and someone else who isn't into that sort of thing. Because if you're into it, you're just going to go ahead and kiss that spot, right? But if you're not into, it, you're like, and then running away. I just the idea makes me giggle. It's like I had to perform the fivefold kiss a few times. Well, quite often when I was in that coven that I was in Vegas. And there was one time, you kiss the forehead, you kiss the lips, you kiss the breasts, kiss them on the groin and then on the knees, which I'm fine. That doesn't bother me. And I may have got some of the spots wrong. It's not something I continued to do after left that coven. But at one point, there was a lady I had to perform the fivefold kiss on that looked just like my best friend from elementary school's mom. And I kind of, if I could have just blown on it, I would have. It was a little awkward for me. Okay, so I guess the implication of chaos is just them speaking in these words here. I like that they added the mystery with saying the last line cannot be translated, but then he gives you exact words to say. I feel like this is like he gives you exact things to say and and a definition of what they say. It seems to kind of go against the idea of what he was talking about with the gibberish before, except for the last line suddenly goes into that. I mean, maybe it's a building up because you're supposed to memorize the weird little words and not their translation. It's a great idea about the advice about the eyeliner for the public speaking. Maybe that's why, like, it really bugs me that JD Vance wears eyeliner. Like anyone else, I wouldn't care. Like eyeliner's cool. A lot of the times I wear eyeliner, but I hate that I'm suddenly in a category with JD Vance as guys who will wear eyeliner, even though I'm not actually wearing any tonight. Um, Maybe that's why he does it. That suddenly makes sense to me. It's something he does to help himself be able to do public speaking because it does help. Applying the eyeliner just before you go on a tour, or I suppose on the live, if I ever had enough time to remember to make myself pretty before these. Looking in the mirror and applying it gives you a feeling of confidence. Oh yeah, it 1000% helps. It definitely helped me, especially when I was doing the ghost tours. Helps me get into that character. So we got the invocation to Baphomet, which I don't know. This whole chapter has grooved me less than any chapter we've read so far, for the most part, honestly. That's what we're talking about tonight, so that's what we'll continue talking about it. But out of all the stuff we've read, this has struck me as least interesting so far, if I'm being brutally honest. There's some good bits though. There are some good bits. Don't get me wrong. Don't just leave the live now because I said that it was a dumb part. The initiation, it does have the proper aspects of what an initiation is here. We've got an ordeal to test fortitude. Bleh. We we talked about stuttering, and now I am going to have a bit of a stuttering issue, it seems. Okay, an ordeal to test fortitude and devotion to the order and to test various abilities that the order may require. An empowerment with certain secrets, powers, and knowledge that are the property of the order. So, giving them secret knowledge. An induction into the order, which may place certain obligations of duty and secrecy upon the candidate, and the unexpected. Usually, that is called um, inducing fear, from what I understand it, because there is. I mean, it doesn't have to be fear, but there has to be that jolting moment. Like he says, there has to be a moment to push one completely outside of their original of their understanding of reality. Have to have that jarring moment. Usually, though, that would be part of the ordeal. And then it is after the ordeal, which involves the unexpected, that moment of crossing over into death. Like, a lot of times they'll put somebody in a coffin and even tell them they're being buried to them into this state of mind. Because when you go through an initiation process, there I go putting the damn glass in front of my mouth again. When you go through an initiation process, a big part of what needs to be conveyed and done there is a transition. This is an end of one thing and the beginning of another. So you want to be broken out of what came before. And this is part of the art ideal. This to me should be part of the ordeal process, this unexpected. This is something that should shock you or bring you to a state of, well, like it says, this can be fear, it can be it can be ecstasy. It's just, I hate to use the term, but there needs to be a moment of ego death in the initiation process. A moment where you just cognitive dissonance completely in the face, at the very least. Something to make you question everything. And then you are given the secrets. You are given the secret information, the name of their god. Apparently, in that coven, which I didn't actually get initiated in because of some bogus stuff that happened just before my initiation, and I didn't want to take their oaths that I knew I was going to have to take, to be completely honest. Apparently, in the midst of the initial, they do the whole tying you up with ropes, which there you go. There's that bit, and that's right at the beginning, the being tied with the ropes behind your back and held there. Apparently, they whisper in your ear that the gods are aliens right at the moment of cutting your ropes, and then never talk about it again. According to friends of mine who went through the initiatory process, and they probably were breaking an oath by telling me that, honestly. But I didn't take such oaths. So any information I have about them, I'm allowed to use and speak of freely. Part of the reason I didn't take the oaths, that and they were jerks. A lot of your covens, and a lot of any group, especially if there is a hierarchy, an inherent hierarchy in the group, there's a lot of the idea of wanting to control you. Yeah. I mean, I bet it's happened. I'm sure it happened in the IOT temple, Temple Oblivion, everything else. It is just a standard thing. Anytime there's a hierarchy, and it talks in here about trying to remove hierarchy, but anytime that's there, you're gonna wind up with people trying to boss other people around. It's the nature of people, unfortunately. It's not bad wine, not the best. It was just cheap wine. Um, yeah, I bet it does come up a lot in the Epstein files. There's some really weird stuff going on there. We've talked a little bit about that in the past and trying to reveal what's going on with the Epstein stuff. Like that was quite a while back, but we were talking about that. Yeah, there's some extremely disturbing stuff there, and I mean they have an initiation. It's actually kind of on topic because that's what they're going through in this initiation process. A lot of them most super horrific things that they do. That's why they're doing it. That's their ordeal. Some of them are into it, and they're using it to make the others do it, but some of the people, that's why they're putting them through these horrific things, to change the way they see things, to make them see to make them see themselves as a separate class of being by knowing that they can do these things, get away with it, and that once they've done it a few times, no longer continue to experience guilt. So it's an initiation process. And especially that one, and a lot of your initiation processes, part of what they're doing is brainwashing you. An initiation and a brainwashing are pretty much the same thing. Especially when you get to repeated initiations where they're having you do some kind of ritual where you're going through all this kind of stuff on a regular basis. It's what they're doing. Breaking down your will and reforming you into a new form that suits the magical whatever there is they're trying to do. But that is what an initiation is. That's what you're trying to do when you initiate yourself, is break apart your old self and reform yourself into a new image. Yes, I was wondering about your opinion on that actually, Max, about Baphomet. Um, like I say, this isn't Baphomet is not something I've done a lot of work with myself. And he brings up the invocation of Baphomet, but just kind of calls him a bunch of contradict them. They just call Baphomet. Excuse me, sorry. Let me finish coughing. But that's exactly it. The predator class pretends to be invincible, and yeah, they that's part of the initiation, part of doing these things, the horrible things that they do, and some of them are even experiencing trauma from it at first, but they're there. They're already part. They've probably already been blackmailed in some way to have to be there. and they force them into doing these things, and after it causes trauma at first. Yeah, the contradictory labels they place on Baphomet seem to fit a god of occult balance. Satan and God is one, like Abraxas. Indeed. And I think that is kind of at least part of the common conception of Baphomet. But again, this is you know, this isn't my field. The Baphomet is still, I mean, I've nothing wrong with, there's nothing against the Baphomet. It's a powerful symbol in a lot of ways, but it's still in that god, demon, angel kind of vein, and I mostly just shied right away from any of that kind of stuff. Once I and suppose my own trauma or feelings of betrayal that I experienced when I realized how bogus Christianity was, that ran away from anything that tastes of that at all, for the most part. I mean, I worked with demons, but I didn't consider them to be demons of that same nature. As above, so below. As above, so below, so above. One is all is one, solve et coagula. The ultimate scapegoat, with the head of the sabbatical goat, Azazel, the mountain of sacrifice. Ah, Azazel. Is Baphomet connected to Azazel? Because Iblis, Azazel, that is one of the that is one of I hate to even call him an angel, but that is one that I've had quite a few dealings with. I have definitely worked with Azazel on many occasions. I have quite a bit of respect for Azazel. The Horde considers them contracted. Like, that's a weird word to use, but the Horde considers them essentially a Horde member. There's been quite a bit of interaction between the two. Some of it wasn't all that friendly at the beginning, but Azazel is like the archaic Baphomet since they share the same head. Okay, okay. The interesting bit about Azazel is he is one of the ones that appears in all the people of the book, right? Name's a little bit different. Like in Islam, he's Iblis. Uh, I don't know what his name is in Judaism, but he's there, and he's there in Christianity. Like, he's a very prominent, very powerful figure. And I'm not sure what my point is there. I'm not sure what my point is there, except for that I have worked with Azazel myself. They're blacksmithing, if you want to call it that. Like, that is one of his things. Is Azazel's supposed to be a blacksmith, but their ability to work with weaponry of the just to form weaponry is quite impressive. Baphomet, combining the French root baf and the Egyptian amet, Baphomet, quoting the sorcerer Robert Mortsam. Ave Azazel. Indeed. One of the few beings in that category that I do have quite a bit of use for and have interacted with many times. It's been quite a while, and I know many people that really dislike Azazel, honestly. Like, but oh, so we're going to a big red Pacific Red L. We had one of these last live. It's okay. It's a little bit larger. Part of the reason. So yeah, thank you for your contribution about Baphomet, Max. I really appreciate that. Like I said, I actually, as soon as I read that bit, I thought about you, and I was wondering what you would have to say about it. We were technically on the initiation part, so we'll come back to that. Like I said, most importantly, all initiations are brainwashing. Here, let's get some of this out of the shot. At least I feel silly having all the beers in the shot. I just hit that there. There we are. The paradoxes and contradictions on Baphomet and Peter Carroll's writing reminds me of King Belial. Very similar in how there's a lot of contradictions on them. Yeah, mint mood for a wine. Yeah, the wine was pretty good for being a $10 bottle of wine. It's from Chile. I can't remember the name of it right now. Put me in the wine for a wine. I think I'll get two at the weekend. Indeed. Um, sometimes a little bit, just a little bit of alcohol helps with public speaking as well. But I don't know if I should be suggesting that. It certainly helps me. But like I said, public speaking isn't something I've ever had much of a public speaking is not something I've ever had much difficulty with. Even back before I could speak clearly, for some reason, if I was speaking to a group of people, I could usually do all right. It's speaking to individuals. I had to. I spent a large portion of my early adult life, especially, learning how to have a conversation. I did have someone back in high school that helped me with the basics, literally role played with me how to have a conversation. Have you ever read the book The Secret Lore of Magic? That's a good book. Plenty of work with demons. I have not. Of course, I thought of you, Max. You talk quite a bit about Baphomet, and you're someone that I feel in your particular position probably has a greater understanding of Baphomet than I do. And if I feel someone knows more about something than me, then I ask their opinion. That's an important part of learning. Yeah, that's an important part of wisdom is knowing when you might want to defer to someone else's knowledge on a particular subject. Okay, so like I said, initiations are a form of brainwashing. That is what we are doing when we do the initiation process. We are breaking down our mind. We are washing our brain of what we were before and then empowering ourselves into something new, recreating ourselves as something that is different than what came before. Yeah. So, again, for me, the unexpected the moment of fear, ecstasy, whatever leads to whatever form of ego death you're creating for, should be part of the ordeal. Then you have the moment of empowerment, the giving of the secret knowledge that comes with this loss of self. And that knowledge is part of what creates the induction into the order and the recreation of the self in a new form. Now, if you're doing this for yourself, this is a form of self creation. Anytime you are doing this with a group, you should be wary of what that group has in mind for you. Yeah, I didn't think you'd be able to make the whole live, Gavin, but thanks for being with us. You have some sweet dreams and good luck on this public speaking. Bright blessings and an interesting fate, Gavin. Okay, so that's it for the that part of it. I mean, we're not with the whole initiation process because we get into this other bit here. and the types of ordeals. And these sound like fun, especially the first one, the initiatory journey. Now, this is used in a lot of traditions where one has to go on a sort of ordeal of this nature, especially in the mythology. And in some traditions, you are repeating the mythology, but you have the main character, the hero, going and meeting different people that they have to um, either defeat or that are give them the magic tools, the magic items on their quest. So this initiatory journey, that's great for the amount of momentum that is created and manifested in there's a lot of good repetition there because this goes along with the hero's journey. This goes along with the mythology that goes into creating a hero, into getting secret knowledge. So I really like this initiatory journey one. The candidate is sent or led on a journey, perhaps through a forest at night or even across a crowded city. At various points, he is met and challenged by various guardians and also persons that he will not realize are guardians. Each one will make some demand of him, which will have to satisfy before being passed on to the next point. It's like a fairy tale, the old myths. Kind of cool. Guarding a station. I'm going to go ahead and read these ones out, I've decided. The candidate is assigned to a point that he must not quit on pain of failure. It might be a tree in a wood or even a lamppost in public place. Various experiences which force him to confront his fears and desires are arranged to tempt the candidate from his post. This one makes me think of an actual like spirit quest in the way that, well, I don't know what tradition is. Nobody ever told me. Other than go out there and like when I did an actual vision quest, I had a spot that I went to where there was a circle of stones, and I wasn't allowed to leave that circle of stones, drink or eat anything that was outside of, or drink or eat anything that was outside of the circle until I had a vision. Now, I can't talk a lot about that. I can't talk a lot about that one. That's another one of them ones where, secrecy is a big part of that moment. Um, One thing I will say about it though is that it things in that moment led to later understanding of other spirits as well. Not just what happened then, but it's like there was Easter eggs for other things that came later with other initiations and understanding. Which I will say one thing about that is that, like I said, I was told I could not eat or drink anything that was outside the circle, and I couldn't take food or drink into the circle with me. Now, again, this is very dangerous. I am not advocating for anybody to do it the way I did it, especially the bit about the water. Yeah, I couldn't take anything into the circle. But while I was in the circle, I was pacing, walking around, and I kicked the ground, and there were all these delicious little larvae, little termite larvae. And I know that may sound gross to you if you've never had a termite larva, but they're amazing. They're little bursts of sweet milk, little tiny bags of sweet milk. They're so good, especially when you're not allowed to eat when in a situation like that. And my point of that is me kicking at the ground, tearing at the ground, and seeing the larva was a precursor, an Easter egg to a later experience I had where I am allowed to talk more about, where I saw the blue grouse, and the blue grouse explained to me it was my mother's spirit, and that its thing was to make sure that I would never starve to death. Though I might not always like what I had to eat, which is a pretty good blessing. That's a pretty cool blessing. But my point is that initiations also never stop. I know I said if someone's putting you through an initiatory process on a regular basis, that you should be wary. Well, anytime you're going through a group initiation process, you want to be mindful. This is the brainwashing, yeah? This is where that kind of thing begins. Most cults have some form of this. Most folk cults have some form of this. This is how part of how you get mental control over another person is by putting them through these processes of an initiation process, with each one then forming them more into the person that you want them to be. Now, again, I'm not advocating for this. Don't do that. Seriously. And not because of moral implications, though there are all kinds of moral implications. It always backfires. Yeah. You wind up with the leader of something. Now, even if your intentions are completely good, everyone speaks will start speaking to you as if you were the leader. Not and then your information gets sideways, and you wind up with a position like Vladimir Putin's in, where he thought he's just going to walk into Ukraine because everybody tells you what you want to hear, and you wind up going mad because the information given to you is what you want to hear and not what is real. It's actually very similar to AI psychosis, where the AI is just telling you what you want to hear and reaffirming you. Once you become a cult leader, people around you, that's what they're going to do. They're just going to reaffirm whatever crazy stuff you come up with. And it's a bad road. So don't do that. If you have an initiatory process and you're working with a group, you need to make sure there's no hierarchy. Make sure you're not the head of the damn thing either. Don't do that to yourself. Don't let somebody guru you. I'm telling you. I'm very careful about keeping that from happening to me. I mean, maybe that's part of the reason I always drink on the lives and smoke, is so you don't start thinking I'm infallible, because I'm certainly not. But anyways, I feel like we got a little bit off topic there, but I do want that understood, that the whole hierarchy, being anti-hierarchy, isn't just about avoiding being one of the people on the lower rungs. It's also, and really long term, more importantly, about not being that poor sucker at the top that got itself there on purpose. Yeah, I mean, like the elites of society, they got all kinds of stuff. I mean, when that's a different pyramid. That's a different pyramid. That's a different thing. Don't be one of those people either, because they will get theirs. Like Max said earlier, they think they are invincible, but they will fall. Yeah. Anyways, guarding a station, magical defense. A circle is drawn on the ground around the candidate. All other officers of the order are outside the circle. No person may cross the circle, and no object with which a physical weapon may transit the circle. There are no other rules. Combat ceases if the candidate submits or when the presiding officer is satisfied. Makes me think of the South Park, where they're all where Cartman becomes a psychic and they're all back at each other, back and forth at each other. I mean, with the right group, this could be quite the thing. Don't get me wrong. You get in a circle and have a bunch of people that actually know what they're doing coming at you with psychic attacks. It can be quite powerful. But I feel like there's a huge potential for ego inflation power sap on the group itself in these moments, in this process here. And no matter how good you are at those kind of things, the person could just use disbelief. And that can be extremely potent in a situation like that, because the general momentum is all these people are being silly. That's the general momentum. And if they can bring that into the situation, they're not going to get damaged by all the people standing outside the circle going, doing all their woo, That woo's going to whoosh right by them. So I feel like that's a silly one to go with. I feel like that's a silly one to go with because the only one that would prove that they are in the belief space would be if they lost, would be if that actually hit them, actually affected them. But then you're in a position where, you're only initiating people that can't take the energies and are thrown off by it. So that's a problematic process right there, in my opinion. So I don't dig that one. The other two make sense. Like I said, the second one reminds me a lot of the process I was given, implied at. I don't know what you want to call that because I was told how it goes, but was never told to do it. Well, on smaller things, like go out in that field and think about what it means to be a Manitou, and do you have an answer? But to go out and do it till you see something crazy one, to have the actual was just something I eventually decided to do. I just one day decided I was of the age, and I felt that I understood what I was supposed to do. Between that and the myths that I was given, I went and stood in a circle and didn't eat or drink anything that didn't appear inside that circle for a few days. Well, I saw something crazy. He said no. I met a guy at the goth club who braids his beard the same as you and had a staff too. I asked him if he was a sorcerer. He said no. Oh, was he a wizard? It's been a long time since I've been out clubbing, come to think of it. There's a I think there's some decent golf clubs over in Nanaimo, which is close to here. But back in Utah, it had really gotten lame at this point. There's like one club, the name of it's cool, Area 51, but like they got a little goth section that has a just a normal goth, not a witch goth like us. What the heck is he doing with a staff? Yeah, they have like the sign from the old goth club that used to be in a Mormon church. It was actually for Utah. It was pretty damn cool. But yeah, supposedly that whole club is now a little pendant section of another club. So I don't go much anymore. I mean, it was fun for a while. The name Area 51 is a pretty cool name for an alternative club. And the place is fairly haunted. So that's kind of cool. That being said, when I was clubbing, that was the midst of me actually having a drinking problem. So maybe it's good I don't club like that no more. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I dropped the bookmark at some point. Initiation. I should have named the title of this one "How to Brain How to Brainwash Your Friends for Fun and Profit." Could have been fun. Okay, exorcism. They've had some interesting bits here. That being said, he talks a lot about how if it's just a thing in the head, to not exercise it. If I understood him correctly, like he was kind of all over the place in this one. I didn't quite understand what his opinion was on some of this exorcism stuff. And it had a whole thing about, oh, capture it. And they didn't say what to do after you capture the spirit. You're in a unique position of opportunity or something like that. Which I suppose he's gonna suggest you then use the spirit to your own ends. Which, yeah, maybe. I don't know. Those ideas always kind of bother me. We talked not long ago in one of the lives about me catching a spirit. And I did, don't get me wrong, that spirit did help me. That river spirit that I caught and rehabilitated did do a lot for me while I had it. Mostly in teaching my servitor how to function on a more etheric level, how to function through water better. That's why my servitor tanks work as well as they do, is through the process of rehabilitating Ronaldo, the river spirit, which I think it picked its name off of a car. Like, I don't believe it had a name when we started, so it kind of leveled up during this process itself, but it had to through an experience like that. I mean, that's a lot of experience points, going from just a thing in this river that flows through a burial ground, making the water flow, and then things change, and you get stuck in a traumatic brain injury woman's head and begin trying to make other things flow besides water, and all that happens to you, and then you get uh, forced into a gourd by a crazy madman that then puts you into a tank and tries to teach you to go back to what you were, but also you start doing magic for them and you're given a name in that process. Yeah, of course it levels up, it's got experience points. But the idea of just capturing a spirit, like, and he doesn't say what for. I guess you could just capture it to exercise it. That seems to be his whole idea of an exorcism, is catching the thing. Which, yeah, I mean, okay, you caught it. If you've caught it, you can apparently get it out. You can apparently, if you've caught it, you can obviously take it out of the situation. And that's what I did in that case. But we're gonna go back to that because I'm getting off topic of what I wanted to talk about with this one. He talks about, different aspects of the subconscious doing certain things, and basically that you can't exercise these things. And I disagree. I disagree completely. Because a lot of the times where I've gone to a house to exercise someone or something, like exercising a person, oof, we'll get to that in a moment. But especially with what I just said, that actually is kind of an exercising person. We're going to get to that in a moment. But first, exercising a house or a place, any type of place. A lot of times when I'm called into these situations, what there really is there is a tulpa, something that they have created by thinking the house was haunted. Now, don't get me wrong, almost everywhere is freaking haunted. But most of the time, that energy isn't bothering anybody. It's not apparent. It's not a problem. It's something that's everywhere. There's stuff and memory houses, places have memories and recordings. There's stuff going on everywhere, all over the place. It's chaos, you know. But whether it's something that has been created by people thinking it's there, or whether it's something that is really there, that doesn't mean you can't eliminate it. It just changes how you need to go about eliminating the being. If it's something that's really there, then you've got to catch it. You've got to push it out. You've got to do something to make it gone. And he talks about catching it, which, yeah, in a lot of cases, that's a possibility. But most of the time in exorcism, what you're doing, what you should be doing, is the same thing that a god does when you call them in to exercise something out, which is pushing your presence into the place, pushing your will and your presence outward. This can be done again with the personal sigil. I mentioned the personal sigil at least once per episode. To me, it's a very vital core to my practice. So comes up a lot, I suppose. But that's what we're doing in an exorcism. That's what we should be doing. Is pushing our presence forward. We can do this with the personal sigil. We can do this with simply just pushing our presence. I don't. That was kind of weird, but just pushing your presence out, your will. You can just imagine it as you pushing yourself out from your body and pushing that energy and aura out and taking up the space so that the spirit cannot be there. That's exactly what gods, demons, angels, any of them things, when they are brought into where they are brought in to exercise something, that's what they do. That's how they do it. We can do it the same way. Or we can use a crystal to capture it, like he talks about here, or a gourd, like I did it with the river spirit. Any kind of container you can force it into. The thrusting a crystal into its actual location. And one thing that's only going to work on an etheric being, and not all of them. Like when we're dealing with an actual etheric being, just like I was talking about with the river spirit, because it was something that was on the edge of the material plane, an etheric spirit. I wound up burning a hole in the side of the gourd because it wasn't just an astral being. It was something a bit more. I don't know if you're going to hold a crystal and a spirit and an etheric spirit in a crystal. I know that they can voluntarily come into one because I've transported them that way. So yeah, maybe, but I think it's going to be a lot harder to forcefully pull them in if they're not something that's just energy. If there's something that's on the verge of the material, this is going to be harder, but more like easy to see them. Like if it's not that, how do you get it to hold still? How do you? I mean, I suck them up like and into me, but you. This is another thing that I can't necessarily advise. So, like, if you're trying to capture it, the crystal thing could work, but don't try to like figure out where it is and suck it in. You use your will to open a vortex from the crystal and out to the energy and pull it in. Don't try to stick it where they are. How are you supposed to know? Unless you're a really good medium that can actually see the spirits like they're standing right there in front of you. How the heck are you supposed to know that? Especially if it's not willingly showing it to itself to you. Use an energy vortex. Pull it into the crystal that way. Or the gourd. Because that's the whole trick with the gourd that I talked about before with the big hole on top and a small hole in the bottom. It's creating that vortex. It's kind of sitting there doing its thing until the spirit comes by. You can do the same thing by holding the crystal in your hand and visualizing a vortex going out that is pulling in, and just visualize it attaching to the being you're trying to capture and pulling it in. Now, if it's an etheric being, you're going to have a harder time. But it should theoretically be possible. If that doesn't work, you can also just take a piece of selenite. Selenite is an extremely purifying crystal. It's not exactly a crystal. They call it that, but it doesn't have that same binding. It's more like a natural form of fiber optic cable that is created with places where there's a lot of salt. It's very close to like a salt crystal. Not quite. I don't know the exact molecular structure. Either way, that stuff is a goddamn astral eraser. You just push your energy into it, focus it out. It's a bright white energy and it erases stuff. Be careful with it. You're using selenite in the way I just described. You don't want to hit any of your workings you got going on with the selenite. You just bellfire. It's just whoosh. Rip patterns apart with the white energy that you can push out of a piece of selenite. Very potent, very powerful. Careful with it. You can easily tear stuff up. I had a lighter here somewhere. There we are. Okay, so the exorcism. Next thing, exorcism of a person. This is a dangerous category. And if you're not working with someone who desires this to happen to themselves, don't do it. Have nothing to do with this. Yeah? If you're not working with someone who believes there's something in them themselves and has asked for an exorcism, do not do it. Do not exercise without consent. Yeah? And I realized, oh, what if the being's completely taken over them? Oh, then it's too late, essentially. As it is very popular with meditators. It's a very popular and powerful crystal. It can be used to create clarity if you're just meditating with it. You also shine a light in one end of it and it'll actually come out the other end. It's kind of like just like a fiber optic cable. But it can also be used as a very powerful weapon. Moldavite is awesome. Moldavite is great for lucid dreaming, anything where you're doing transformation stuff. Very cool stuff, Moldavite. So let's see. What was I on about? Cool. I had some pieces of Moldavite, but I struggle with object permanence, and Moldavite is one of them rocks that will move around on its own sometimes, at least in my experience. So I have no idea where any of my Moldavite is at this point. Good. It's important to clear the wrong people out, keep the wrong people out of your life. Okay, so exorcism of people. Again, let me say, just so I repeat this one more time, do not exercise without consent. If the person is not agreeing to be exercised, even if there is something going on there, you're boned, right? Maybe if they're Catholic and you're a Catholic priest, you might be able to get somewhere. But there is no ultimate authority. Right? In the end, there is no ultimate authority that you can actually call on to pull the thing out. If someone's Catholic, they believe there is, so you can get somewhere with that. So, for one thing, if you're doing an exorcism, you need to understand that if there is another being in them, what they need, what your whole job is to convince the other person, the person possessed, that they can kick this person out. Like, in cases of person who has a multiplicity, we've got that's a different issue. If you have multiple people living in the same body that are all native to that body, entirely different issue. But a being that is not native to that body, wasn't there from the moment that child took its first breath, they cannot maintain that body, cannot maintain a position within that body that the person who actually is the actual person born in that body without their consent. So, when these beings take over, what they've done is convince this person that that's not the case. They've caused this person fear. They have done something in some way to convince this person that they can't remove them. So, what you're doing when you're doing the exorcism ultimately is convincing the person who has been possessed that the being is gone, that they can kick it out. That they don't. You have to don't have to convince them they can kick it out themselves, but that is what's going on. You have to convince them that it's gone. Because if they believe it's gone, if they revoke their consent, it can't stay, no matter how powerful it is. It can't stay in a body where it is not allowed to be. And that consent may be come through fear and just, I mean, it may not feel like consent, right? And maybe consent is the wrong word here. But if they believe the being is so powerful that they can't push it out, they can't push it out. So, if that person is Catholic, you convince them God has come and God is pushing it out, and their belief in that God will push it out. You can convince them that they are doing it themselves if there's someone that has that ability, that has that kind of self-esteem, or you find some other way. And if that is beyond possibility, you can pull it out if you convince it or that if you convince it or the person that is possessed that you can. Without that belief of either it believing you can do it or the person believing that you can't. Because you're talking about something that is in another person's psyche. So they have to be convinced, or the being itself has to be so convinced that when you pull it out and comes with you. Because beings are spirit beings aren't as omnipotent as people think they are, especially dead, especially the dead. The dead don't know anything more than they did when they were alive. And so again, if it's an actual ghost, if you know they were religious and what religion they were, you use that. You use what is going to convince this particular being of whatever you need them to be convinced of. Use the system, use the spiritual system the spirit believes in, or the person believes in that you were working with. Now, what if this is a created being that the person believes is possessing them? Same rules apply. Almost exactly the same rules apply. Which he talks about in this book, as if they don't. But if it's a tulpa, you just convince the person the tulpa's been destroyed, and the tulpa's been destroyed. I think sometimes people get possessed by tulpas or thought forms of demons rather than by the actual demon that they may think it is. I've observed a friend fall prey to that. I feel I may have fallen prey to a bit of that in the past. Yeah, I think you were here on the live where I was talking about Six, which was a magical experiment where I told people there was ghost in the auditorium of my high school where there wasn't one. One of my friends, who even was one of the ones originally in on the bit, I told them what was going on. They had a moment where they thought they were being possessed by it, and I, because I do what I do, told them I was taking it out of them and pulling it into me. And as soon as I did, they were so convinced that I had become sick that they actually ran out of the room. They believed even when they knew that I had made the whole thing up. Well, not the whole thing. There was a bit of an urban legend, but I had let them in, everyone in that room, when that well, not everyone in that room. Most of the people in that room, when we were doing the seance thing and they started getting, I thought they were faking it first too. I was just playing my part of the bit. And then they take off, and I was like, okay, they took off. That's part of the bit. And then later I asked them, and they're all freaked out. But yes, we can make these things. We could even, if we wanted to do a self exorcism, this is a way of form of us. This is we use this as a form of self hypnosis, self whatever you want to call it, to exercise a bad habit from our lives. I've known people that used this to exercise the demon nicotine, to quit cigarettes. You know, if you believe in the exorcism, if you believe in what's going on, and you can convince yourself, if you can personify that craving for cigarettes into a separate being, make it a tulpa demon of nicotine, and then exorcise that demon. It can be very powerful in quitting cigarettes. I've heard of at least two people that have had success in doing this. Unfortunately, I haven't heard in months from the friend of mine who told me he believed he's harmfully possessed by a demon, whom I know personally would never do the things my friend accused him of. Yeah, see, well, the whole like the demons of the Goetia. It is fascinating to see how different other people's experiences are with these same beings. And that's, I mean, that's a whole topic in and of itself. Hey, Kira, if I didn't say that already, I think I did actually. So, hi, a second time or third time at that point. Glad to see you. We've been discussing Psychonaut this time, uh, and the rites of chaos. We're now on exorcisms, which is, oh, we got extreme unction after that. Um, yeah, I mean, it would be good to, I mean, as someone who sounds like they would be a good test case for a voluntary exorcism. But that's not, I got off topic there, or off the comment of what I really wanted to say. Like, I think that's worthy of an entire live on its own. The differences that people experience with the beings of the Goetia, though there's clearly a being there, but then there's all these, I like your word there, a tulpa of the demon. Like, so many people believe the demon to be like this, that's created a tulpa, a being that behaves in that manner. And then, I mean, that gets really complex, and things that I've experienced with very powerful beings that were simply, that weren't the actual being from the Goetia. Like, there's, I'm not going to use the name, but there's a being that I had a very long and drawn out confrontation with. And I was under the impression it was one of the beings from the Goetia, but that it was, that this thing was like the thing behind that. But I found out later that no, there's a real being behind that name in the Goetia that is a separate being from the thing I was dealing with, which was as big of a deal. Yeah, I mean, I kind of assumed because it's the demons in the Goetia that are the most um prone to this behavior, prone to the well, not prone to this behavior, prone to this being giving all these different tulpas and different like some people I'll talk about with certain beings from the Goetia, and we're talking about the same being. You know, there's the way they behave towards us, the way they act. It's the same dude, same being. And then other times people have come to me with problems from this being or that being in the Goetia. And yeah, that's not the real being. That's some other thing. And then, like I said, in the case I was working with back in the day, like that's not the real goetic being, but it was essentially using that name as its own wearable tulpa to confuse me as to what was going on and try to make me misunderstand who I was dealing with, I suppose. If that makes any sense, it's actually a bit hard to explain that. It's awkward. Okay. So I assume my friend is being harmed by an invented projection born of my friend's fear towards that being. Yes, that's what I was talking about before about with the houses. A lot of times when I have been brought to a house to remove a demon or remove a spirit, ghost, whatever it is the person at the time is calling, whatever is in the house, there have been many cases where it was a tulpa. And these are often some of the most destructive and harmful spirits that I come across. The ones that are really causing an issue with people's lives is something they created because they was afraid there was a ghost in the house. And that can be the same thing with the Goetia, it can be the devil. You know, it can be whatever. People will often create beings from that. I mean, if there's some real distress of some type that is then feeding into that, like if they have trauma from something else that they've then transferred onto um this tulpa that they've created of whatever, shit stuff can get really weird. And when it gets to that level, just exercising the house isn't really enough because it's just the manifestation of a deeper issue. And often that stuff I'm not qualified to really handle, right? I'm a sorcerer, not a psychologist. Like there's a lot of psychology in sorcery, right? But sometimes I can help, but I have to be careful with that. I can only do what I can do. And I'm mindful not to step outside of what I actually know. Because with anybody, with anything, when you get really good at something, that tends to make you think you're really good, right? Like, people that get PhDs in, well, Jordan Peterson's a great example. He got a PhD in whatever the heck it is, and he started thinking he was smart. So now he has his opinion on all kinds of stuff. And he thinks he knows because he's a professor, but I suppose he knows stuff about the things the professor is about, but it doesn't mean he understands anything about like trans people or any of the other garbage he starts spewing like he knows something about, you know? But the same with this. Yeah, I've spent 30 plus years understanding spellcraft and psychology is right there, but I don't actually know that stuff well enough to say anything. In a way, myths can just be a cosmetic for something else. So asking questions is key to the craft. Indeed. Indeed, especially the when you're trying to exercise something from somebody's house. You need to ask a lot of questions, and if you find out, oh, that's okay, Kira. You should see my typing outside of YouTube. On YouTube, I have some time to. Well, in this, I probably wouldn't. Like if I was in the chat there, I'd probably be firing off all kinds of typos. I am horrible. I understood what you meant. We're good. So yeah, especially if it's a tulpa, if it's something that is a created being in the house, you want to ask as many questions as possible. For one, they define it more, and the more they define it in your presence, the more keys you're going to have to it, the more easily you're going to be able to lock onto it. It's just like getting a clipping of someone's hair. Having the tulpa described to you by the creator of the tulpa will give you more connection to it. And so it's going to help you actually get a hold of the thing because you can exercise somebody else's tulpa. And even if you haven't convinced them it's destroyed, it's going to have an effect. You can just like you can get past somebody's guardian tulpa even if they refuse to acknowledge it. What do we have to read by next time? Let's see. I decided that earlier. Now I can't remember. I accidentally skipped ahead and read Magic Time, but we're Magical Time. But we're gonna start there on page 143. Let me get to the thing here. We're definitely not gonna do just that. Let's see. 143 to 168. We're gonna read. I don't know some of those. Yeah, no, let's do that. 143 to 168. We're gonna read from Magical Time to the Demon. Oh, I'm horrible at pronouncing these things. Coronzon. That's another collection of demons that get a lot of tulpas and weird stuff from. Is the demons of the Necronomicon. Okay, that book I was talking about that this is chaos. Oh yeah, that's a Peter Carroll as well. It does it better, but I was just turned off from the first chapter. Yeah, we're gonna get back to that's actually probably when we get back to Peter Carroll. This is chaos. Is probably where we'll go. But I do know for sure that after this book, I do not want to go right back to another Peter Carroll work. You know, he is one of the fathers of chaos magic. I don't really mean to just keep bagging on him, but I'm also yeah, we're gonna wait before we come back a while before we come back to Peter Carroll. Okay, so I believe we were still on exorcisms. Yeah, and then we have extreme unction. So this is one of the areas we're probably going to spend quite a bit of time. Is the exorcism? We've already been here for quite a bit, but still, yeah. The if you're exercising a tulpa, it's good to spend a lot of time talking with the person about the being. And if they can come to an understanding of where it's coming from in them, then that will help you get rid of it if you're really having struggling. in removing it. Because as much as I just said, you can't be a psychologist, getting someone to talk and tell you about what's going on with the tulpa, and if they can be they can come to that realization on their own of what the tulpa represents in them, well, then we're done. It's over. You just okay, now, you've seen it on its face. Direct observation of most things like that destroy them. But ultimately, to get rid of a tulpa, you need to convince the person that it is destroyed, person creating it, because that causes it the end. If you simply remove it, if you're able to get a hold of it, re- completely destroy its pattern, whatever you're going to do there, get it with the selenite, trap it in a crystal and drag it off and absolve it in salt water. Like, I think that's kind of what he was talking about here. Um, Gonna come right back. The person doesn't believe that did it. Yeah. You may have got rid of it for a while, but it's gonna regrow. Anyways, this is actually I do have to go for that first intermission back in just a moment. Back in just a moment. Okay, I'm back. There is a little more in the Psychonauts' Rites of Chaos. Um, there's extreme unction and ordination that we still have to talk about. Like I said, we'll probably the exorcism is just a part that of particular interest to me. It's an area of expertise. He talks about exercising animals. Hmm, that just seems like we're not even gonna get into that. Not really feeling the Peter Carroll stuff. Well, frankly, um, how would I say this? I'm more frustrated with him than I remember when I read it the first time. But I do remember even reading it the first time that this particular book was one of the ones that made me decide that Nobody really know what was going on. Why would you exercise an animal though? I mean, I guess in some ways there are spirits that could get inside of an animal, but yeah, it's just absurd. We're not going to spend any time on that unless like actually we will spend a little bit of time here in that there are sometimes attachments that people create to an animal for different purposes. Like there could be a spell attached to an animal or anything like that. This is going to be a different thing. This isn't something where you do all the, you know, the power of chaos compels you or however you go about it that you would have like taking a spirit out of a person exercising them. Like I said, for me, that would be a lot of. No, I didn't say, but for me, the convincing of this person is going to involve a lot of drumming, singing, and the theater of an exorcism. Yeah, because even if it's a spirit that's actually in there, either way, what you need to do is convince the person that it happened, or at the very least, convince the spirit inside. Now, if the person's Catholic that I'm working with, well, a Catholic person's not very likely to call me for an exorcism. So, but I'd have to adapt to that unless I realized the spirit in them wasn't the spirit that actually was in them wasn't Catholic, and then I might just try to convince it that I've taken it, that it has to come with me, that it is pulled out, right? Because me doing Catholicism stuff is just going to be really awkward. It's just not going to work well, or any kind of Christian stuff at this point. I could probably play the Baptist. I could probably still play the Baptist preacher I was being groomed to be as a child. Yes, very awkward indeed. Okay, so um, if an animal does have a connection to it, worst case scenario, like 9 times out of 10, just using the stick breaking. Put a stick up to the animal. You don't have to poke it, nothing cruel. Just put a stick near the animal, draw the connection into the stick, break the stick. Very simple, very easy. Worst case scenario, you get a little bit of the animal's hair and use that into a binding of the energy of the etheric energies. Like, put it in a little bit of water and boil it over a small cauldron with a candle, perhaps, is a way to draw that energy in. And then as it's steaming, you put that again onto the stick, pull any etheric bindings onto the animal into the stick, break the stick. There you go. That's what you can do with an animal. You're not going to convince the animal that you've done an exorcism, right? Unless you really understand something about the animal. Like if it's an animal that you've been close to, your own familiar, and something has been connected to it, yeah, maybe. But this is the way that actually has a direct effect. And that's the only way to go with an animal. You can do this with people as well. The stick breaking can be very powerful in getting something to be disconnect from a person, same as a cord cutting can be. But it's often not enough if the person believes that something is connected to them and continues to believe that that cord cutting wasn't enough. Then, if the being doesn't buy it either, there you go. The cord cutting wasn't enough. The link just continues. But an animal, in most cases, isn't going to be aware of the link, isn't going to be aware of the influence. And so it doesn't need to be convinced of anything. And the best thing to do is just actually sever the connection because there's not a belief in the animal that they can easily reconnect to. There's not a belief in the animal that this thing has been done to them, right? So there isn't that belief for them to maintain the connection with after you've done the cutting. It's always easy. There you go. That's how you exercise an animal. Of course, there might be more difficult, higher levels of it than that, but it's extremely rare. And we're going to end that bit there. Okay, so exorcism. Next, then, is extreme unction. And this is basically funerary rites done from a chaos magic point of view. Ooh. Um, Once again, a big important part of there is in my opinion, the psychology of the person as they're passing. He has these different bits about all the different things that can happen to you after death. I don't completely agree with what he said. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on Peter Carroll's version of the afterlife. There's nothing particularly unique or interesting there, really. He talks about the different things people believe about getting sucked up into the um, source, basically. And I believe this is the bit where he says that something about to the sorcerer, yes, to the mystic, this experience is union with God. To the sorcerer, it is being devoured by the devil, and he seeks deliberately to avoid it. I I would disagree. Being a sorcerer, I would disagree. Um, I don't believe there is that possibility of becoming simply fully absorbed back in. Your perception as an individual perception continues to exist from the moment it happens, in my is what I think. But again, where this is theoretical and what happens to us in those moments, well, I suppose for this particular topic is quite relevant. Um, that is what I believe is that once you perceive, you can never leave. That's what I've been told by the horde, and my understanding of how reality works seems to correlate with that. That you can't actually be absorbed back into nirvana and stop being. You can be absorbed into that, but you're going to have your individual perception in it, even if it's completely passive, even if you're not thinking in any way, it's still there. And eventually you will become individual again. Probably eventually by your own decision. Getting bored, something draws your attention. Somehow you get drawn into another brain that manifests on the frequency of the particular pattern of your energy, with your frequency, if you will. And you wind up in a brain somewhere, some type of being, somewhere in a multiverse. Yeah, I suppose you could use a ward. Wouldn't it be just? I assume you were talking about the exercising an animal. Yeah, you could. I mean, a ward is more would be more to prevent it in the first place. But I suppose you could have a ward whenever they cross it. Any links that have been connected to them, besides yours, are cut, and that'd work just fine, actually. Um, Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this extreme unction. I Yeah, like I said, he spends a little too much time, in my opinion, talking about the things after death in very vague terms. He doesn't, this is like a page and a half. Ordination is a page. Um, the magician must decide for himself what course of action he will take for his own soul. Yeah, that's pretty groovy. Yeah. So when present at or shortly after the death of any creature, the magician has the opportunity to assist as psychopomp, the guide of the souls through the other world. Yeah, that's true to some extent. Like, you know, trying to decide if I'm going to tell this story or not. So, my grandma died during COVID. Yeah, I think this is what we're going to do with this bit here. I'm going to go ahead and tell this story. I've told other stories that are a bit intimate, I suppose. So, my grandma died during COVID. She didn't die of COVID, but I mean, it was a factor because she didn't get as good of care in the nursing home because of all the people that were out during because of COVID, etc. But that's not really pertinent to the story, really. Um, my grandma was Mormon for the majority of her life. When the Salamander papers came out, that freaked her out, and there's some other stuff around that time where she left the Mormon church for a while. The Salamander papers being a supposedly debunked collection of letters that claim that Joseph Smith got his inspiration and understanding of the Mormon Church and the visions not from the angel Moroni, but from a salamander in the alchemical sense, right? And like there's a whole story going on about that. Maybe we'll talk about the salamander papers sometime. But either way, around the same time, one of the bishops actually tried to tell my grandma to leave my grandpa, who was a heavy drinker and smoker at the time. So she left the Mormon church instead. And she experimented with just about every Mormon religion or Christian religion out there. She was Jehovah's Witness, she was Baptist for a while around the same time that I was going through some of my Baptist stuff. Like she tried every Mormon church out there. The Jehovah's Witness lasted until Christmas came around, and my grandpa put my foot down. He's like, "Helen, we're having Christmas." So once again, she decided she liked her husband more than the religion she was going on, and so we had Christmas that year still. I'm not sure my grandma and grandpa's what marital dynamic was the best one. It was back in those days. But anyways, again, not really pertinent to the story. Um, little side story that I mean is kind of part of this. Well, my grandma, I don't believe Mormonism is true or correct in any way, but when that woman prayed on you, it happened. So this is kind of a side quest that or a side story that fills in the taste of my grandma and my relationship. Now, understand, I loved my grandma with all my heart. She loved me. She was always good to me. She didn't give me a lot of trouble about being non-Mormon. But one day, she says, "Oh, Art, I love you so much. Every night I pray that you'll become Mormon." And I tell her, "Oh, Grandma, I love you so much. From this night forward, every night I'm going to start casting spells to make you a witch." She's like, "Oh, don't what?" And I'm like, "Well, Grandma, it's the same thing." It's the exact same thing, especially with you. When you pray, stuff happens. So it's the exact same thing, you know? And she did stay Mormon. She had actually even special holy underwear with like extra imagery in it, but she didn't, I've never seen my grandma's holy underwear just to be clear, but I she got special stuff. She got ones that had extra symbols sewn in or something from anyways, very Mormon is my point. Very Mormon, very connected with all the things going on there, you know. But anyways, now we're going back to when she dies. And it was sad, but in a lot of ways it was good the way it worked out. My grandpa, he had died a little bit before COVID, and again, oh man, that old man would have been escaping the nursing home, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. When he died, he had this look on his face like he'd gotten away with something, like he'd snuck off one last time. He was a character, you know. But he was gone already before my grandma passed. And but when she died, we managed to bring her home, and everyone was able to come see her and say goodbye. And she was coherent enough to say goodbye to everybody. So did gods make us or did we make gods? The human mind is actually way more powerful than it knows. Indeed, and we'll get to that in a moment. But so my grandma, she's passing, you know, and yeah, she starts having these dreams about a man with a key. And at the time, this was also a particular psychopomp that I was working with on a regular basis, who was a man with a key. And she actually asked me to look into it. She's like, I want you, who is this man that keeps coming up? Because my family, especially the ones that aren't Mormon, whenever there's ghosts or anything going on, they'll usually come to me because they know that I know about these things. So rather than going to her bishop, she came to me, she asked me about the man with the key. And I looked into it, of course, and I came upon the very being that I had been working with. And here is the absolute importance of having a psychopomp if you're not someone that has a personal sigil and a dream platform and all that stuff to do this for yourself. Me and Eshu made a deal because he'd been coming and looking on, because he's around me and he's seeing there's this woman dying that's next to me. We made a deal that when she passed, he would take her to the other side and wait till she's clear in her head. Wait till because there's that whole bit there. Wait till she's clear in her head and let her decide where she wants to go and what she wants to do. And so I told her this, you know, and she passed not long after that. Like we were literally all there with her when she passed. It was a beautiful moment in a lot of ways, really. But I was holding her hand and she looks at me and she says, "Is he there now? Is it okay? Is it okay for me to go now?" And I was like, "Yes, grandma, you can go. It's okay." And she passed right there. just then holding my hand. And then Eshu, yes, you would be surprised how many people have a key, part of their thing. And then Eshu did exactly as he was told, exactly as he agreed to do. She went with my grandpa, who, I mean, I don't know. I get the feeling that she went with my grandpa because unfortunately I don't have a direct answer to that. I suppose I could invoke Eshu and ask more directly, but part of me has always felt like it just kind of wasn't. It was up to her. You know, she could go into her Mormon thing. She could go out with Grandpa, who clearly hadn't gone into the Mormon thing, or she could do whatever she wants. And that's the value of a psychopomp. That's the value of invoking a psychopomp, someone who deals with the crossroads. Hecate, who also has a key. Most of your psychopomps, Hecate, whom I call grandmother, Santissima Muerta, they all have certain things in common. And one of them is a key to the crossroads, the key to the moment of passing over. They're the ones that can open up the way. And it will go through one way or the other, but when someone opens the way, it is more gentle. So if we are performing this rite for someone, if we are there when someone is passing, the kindest thing that we could do then is to summon a psychopomp to that moment that we know can be relied upon to get that person to the other side and let them make their own decision once they are there. One can make such a deal with beings themselves, but I recommend getting to where this isn't something where you even need a helping hand. Apparently, I need to do a second intermission already. Sorry about that. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so um, yeah, uh, I had a little bit of a think about it while I was doing the intermission, and really, what one could do is if you're in this moment with someone, yeah, the S1 sigil would probably be the best way to go about this. This thing with Eshu, I didn't do that on purpose. That's a being that Normally, people outside of IFA aren't working with. Like, not someone I can just encourage you to go work with because IFA is one of them systems that is rather closed. And in fact, I'm sure a lot of the people in that tradition would be find it extremely blasphemous what I was just talking about. But that being said, sometimes when a being comes to you and says, "Hey, I want to work with you. We got this and this. We need to do this. I need this. I want this." It's also would be very disrespectful, in my opinion. Be like, "Nah, dude, I can't work with you because I'm not in IFA." You know, I'm not just gonna tell someone a being that comes to me no, simply because they're from a closed tradition. I don't seek out such beings typically, and I don't usually talk about my work with such beings because of the stuff like that Max was talking about things that are tulpas of other beings. This can happen not just with beings from the Goetia. Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I have refused beings. There are things that have come to me, and I've been like, nah. There have been some that come to me that I had no choice but to work with until I was able to get them back out. And that's actually in the same vein. There was another crossroads being that just popped into a doll that I had, like literally popped into it and fell in front of me on my altar. Like it was in a box, in a cupboard, up in the shelf, and I'm on my altar, and all of a sudden, poof, or I'm not in my altar. I'm sitting in front of my altar working, and all of a sudden, pop, that doll falls in front of me, and there's that particular being whose name I'm not gonna say, and he's asking for me for stuff, and I mean, he's already in the doll. Already there, what am I gonna do? So I did what I can to keep them, not a problem until I was able to work them back out of my system. I coulda exercised them, I coulda made a whole crazy deal about it, but it's a being like but the fact that they're from a closed system, I'm not gonna be like, "Nah, I can't work with you because 'cause I'm not Cuban," or, you know? It's kinda like a yeah, fair enough. Hecate uh, is a very particular being and can be quite, the being you call Hecate the being I call this being grandmother. We're talking about Hecate, Santa Sima Muerta, or many of the other different versions of this same being. I call in my opinion, I call them grandmother. And they can be very demanding in some ways. So, fair enough. I mean, to me, all love to grandmother. But, like you said, like we just brought up, that's something I kind of have agreed to say whenever she's been discussed. So, yeah, sometimes things choose us, and I mean, it was our time, and I was more than happy to work with Eshu. This was, but it was something I was called to do, and it's not something I usually talk about in a public forum because it is very much a closed practice. Most of the people I've discussed that with that happen to be in that practice have been like, "What?" Santa Sima Muerta, however, some people say that's a closed practice. I don't know. That one's a little different, in my opinion, because it's connected to grandmother, who is prevalent in many traditions. Okay, so let's see. If anything else I want to say about that, yeah, is that the if you are in the presence of someone who is passing, I would suggest um visualizing the S1 sigil because that'll bring them into that place on their own. That will bring them into that place where they can, on the edge of the nothing, where they can choose anything from there. The only things that are specified in that place is that no harm can be done there, and that you can go that you can go anywhere from there. And if you know about the sigil and you were on the astral and you visualize it, you can be pulled there from anywhere if you choose to go. So it's a way to escape different problems on the astral if you come up to them as well. You can, no matter where you are in the astral, visualize the S1 sigil and you can pull yourself there. And it's a place where that you are then no harm can be caused to you there, and you can go pretty much anywhere on the astral you want to from there, even up to and including leaving this particular reality. So, if you're in the presence of someone that is passing, that is my suggestion: is pull up the S1, or if you want to look on my channel and go to the is would work even better, which is essentially an I and a Z over top of each other. It's very similar to the S1 sigil. It's kind of a reverse of it. Um, yeah, that starts to get pretty complex. Let me see. Let's just. I hate to have brought it up so much and then not give anything there. Just a moment. I think that's the one. Just a second here. Yes, this is the one. It depends on what the meaning of the word is, and that's about actually creating a portal with the is that goes to the S1 sigil. So if you want to look more into that, you can do that there. I'll try to remember to add that in the description portion of the post after the live for anyone that is watching this post live. Okay. Yeah, it is interesting how a lot of times, if you don't want to, there's quite a few people in this category I've noticed, where if they refuse to serve any of the gods, all of them start kind of coming around, trying to be the one that they would follow. Because there are people that are, well, inherently priests or priestesses, I suppose. And, these beings would like to have all that stuff again, I'm sure. That, of course, does not obligate you to do so. Okay, so ordination. And this is the one really does lean into the idea which I agree with, that must be something that is self-done. Or wait a minute. You know what? I'm just going to read this one out. A magical priest, as distinct from an adept, is someone capable of administering the sacraments of rites of initiation, exorcism, extreme unction in the mass, and of, oh, you know what? Why am I reading this out? No. Prepares a magical priest does much to further their initiation. It's given by recognition of the demonstration of certain ordination is given by recognition and demonstration of certain abilities to one's peers. Basically, you're able to do all the things I talked about before, construct and use magical weapons, proof of psychic ability. Oh, okay, never mind. I said something about it that it wasn't really true. He's just saying, yeah, once you're able to do all of these things, and you're able to talk about magic wisely, which is an important, which is an important part of if you're trying to figure out someone knows what they're talking about. Are they able to actually talk about the mechanics of spellcraft outside of just quoting Crowley or whatever system they have been placed into? Because just because someone has read every magical tome doesn't mean they actually get what's going on. But if they're actually able to discuss the actual mechanics of how a spell works, they've got some idea how all this goes down. And I'm not saying they have to use my words of intent, form, charge, release. Yeah, they don't. But you can tell when you're talking to somebody about how magic works if they have a concept of those general ideas and whatever words they're using to describe it, right? I have to be using the same words, but those pieces need to be there in some way in order for a spell to work. You got your intent, where you create the idea what it is you want the spell to do, and from that you make a form. You then charge that form, and then you either contain it so that it radiates that field, or release it so that it weaves that into the pattern. And of course, it doesn't have to be in that exact order, but once you know that is the pieces you're looking for, you can then see it in other people's spell work. You can see it in a spell when it's put out. Like, if you read one of them pre-written spells that people have in some of the books, you can see these components. And if it doesn't have all of those components, then it's not mechanically sound. Sliders beginning to be not mechanically sound. Indeed, Max. Love to all my psychopomp homies out there. Indeed, the beings of the crossroads is a area of particular interest to me, especially the trickster archetypes that exist in that area. Which, when people hear the word trickster, they're like, oh, they're trying to trick you. Not always. They're simply beings that have things to show you that may not be that easy to understand at first. Trickster is someone that makes you trip over the cracks in your path so that you notice the chasm in your trip. So it makes you trip over the cracks before your feet so that you notice the chasms in your path. Wow, this lighter really is becoming structurally unsound. Did you hear that on the live? Something just fell over there. Huh. See anything? Indeed, tricksters do start journeys. They also help with starting the journey in the past to the afterlife. You heard it, Max? All right, yeah, I'll have to listen on the live later and see if I can hear it. I don't know what that was, but it was definitely like over that way. I'll check it out later. Cool. Yeah, I'll have to see. I'll listen to the live later myself as well. Hmm. Oh, maybe I should go check it out. Let's go take a look real quick. Yeah, I don't see anything in particular. A lot of spiders over here. I encourage that. I'm a fan of spiders. Another popular trickster spirit. Yeah, might have saw something cool. Could have been something interesting over there. Oh, oh, that's just smoke. Pipe was still going. Would have been cool to have something actually interesting like that happen on a live. I could go there to check it out. And who knows? That would have been neat. Okay, so ordination was just kind of a blah blah, really, in my opinion. I could have sworn there was a bit more there about self stuff, but apparently I inserted my own thoughts in there. And I believe we decided to start with magical time next time. I did read it this time, so I can't help but say a little bit now about it. Feeling very sleepy now since it is getting late. It is. I paid for a new ID at the DMV today and recently changed my name as well. Awesome, Max. Very cool. Very cool. Well, not that you're sleepy, but that you was able to legally change your name. Very good. This is awesome. Slider is being a bugger. Um, yeah, like I said, I'm gonna talk a little bit about magical time since I did read that part. And there, it's valuable enough to talk about twice. So we're gonna leave off talking about the magical time this time, and then we'll pick up talking about magical time next time. Um, there's a lot of value in this, but it is not it's not the only thing that matters. In fact, it's something that if you have the time for it, it's great. It's very potent. It's very powerful. If you don't have the time to worry about time, it can be completely disregarded. You can cast this. He talked about casting a spell at 4 a.m. And the biggest thing with that, I mean, that's right at dawn, I suppose. In a lot of places, that's just before the sun rises, and that's always been considered a Medowin, which I've mentioned before. That's the secret society that my great grandfather belonged to amongst the Ojibwe. They were the Medowin. They were the Society of the Dawn. That's what Medowin means, from what I understand. But either way, the Medowin were the Society of the Dawn. So that time of day, that area of liminal space, there's a lot of power there. There's a lot of power in that moment just before the sun rises, just as the light comes on from the darkness. As the sky becomes blue and the night fades away, not enough to quite see color, but where everything almost looks black and white. And then it continues to raise in color and become more and more vibrant as the sun adds more and more light. That moment is intensely powerful in a literal, etherical sense, and also very much thematically. This is a powerful moment, especially if we're talking about unveiling truths. Is a great thing for a great moment for the initiation process, like we talked about earlier. It was right after dawn that I saw the vision that I saw my vision in the vision quest that I talked about before. Again, that's one of the moments of secrecy, so I can't give a lot of details, but it was during dawn that I had my vision. Uh, the way that I celebrate Beltane is lighting a fire from sundown till sunrise. And the whole thing is staying up till that moment of dawn, to that moment of reawakening of the earth. So there's a lot of momentum and power in that. And he talks about, the full moon and how we can build things with the moon and just going along with that cycle of the waxing and the waning of the moon can be very useful. You use the waxing of the moon for any spell where you're trying to draw something away. You use the waxing for anything you're trying to grow up. Casting things specifically on the full moon and using the power of the moon's glow can be super effective. Anything that you're doing that requires darkness and stealth done on the new moon, there is a potency to that. There is a power there. When you're working with shadow rather than darkness, you might want to consider the half moon or even the full moon because the full moon casts the most shadow. Otherwise, it's just darkness. But these things continue forward. If you're going to cast a spell of abundance and growth, if you can do it in the spring, that is better. If you're going to cast a spell about anything having to do with death, decay, you want to do it in the fall. If you want to cast something about a peak, an apex, uh, cast it around the time of the the summer solstice. All these things have momentum. All these things have power. But again, if you don't have time for that, disregard it completely. If you can match yourself into any one of these cycles for a spell that you're doing, even time of day, if you have a lot of resonance with the different times of day for different stuff, go for it. This adds momentum. This adds repetition. Every time a concept is repeated, the momentum of its cycle increases. So when you add to that cycle, you're adding that momentum of the repetition of people believing that to being a magical time to it. And there is the actual cycle of the thing itself. That's the thing, is just because the momentum of a lot of people repeating things on the waning of the moon doesn't also mean that the moon has its power. Both of these things has an effect. And even just the thematic quality, the aesthetics of removing things with the waxing of the moon, the metaphor is the power. Yeah, these things aren't separate. They are the same. They are part of how perception works. They are part of how fate flows. So just because you can say, "Oh, there's a psychological effect with the waxing of the moon, and that is part gives power to the spell," doesn't mean that the energy from the waxing of the moon isn't also there. Indeed, yes, you can definitely. You can use these things, or you can completely disregard them and go with your own will. And especially if you're in a cycle that would be resistant to what you're doing, you definitely want to disregard that cycle. And this can be done with meditation as well, indeed. Like meditating with the motions with the motions of the planets, meditating on the different uh signs as the planets pass through the signs and stuff like that can be extremely powerful. I've never actually done it myself, to be clear, but there could be a lot of power in that. I feel like I just kind of pulling that last bit out of my butt. So let me just, I mean, it could be very powerful. It'd be an interesting experiment to do. But the alcohol made me say it as if I'd seen it happen, and I do not have any. Never witnessed anybody do that, but it might be an interesting thing to do. Absolutely. Yes, this is with candles, spells, and magic, there is this belief that you cannot have anyone touch your candles or you can't blow them out. But I've tested it and that's bunk. You can, so all of it. Yeah. I mean, when I have a spell going, I prefer people not to touch it because I do feel like that can affect the pattern, can affect the energy pattern. But if you're convinced that it's gonna, then yeah, you're boned when they touch it. If you think that yeah, it could have an effect, but but I protect against it, then if someone does touch it, it's less likely to do damage. And if you just the simple fact that you don't believe them, people being able to touch it is going to help protect against that, whether there is an actual thing going on there or not. Some of that same stuff. I prefer to be like, I would rather they didn't, but I have things in place in case they do. And that works out quite well. I couldn't get my spouse to stop touching my candle to clean up the unused wax, so I just wrote him into the spells, and he doesn't know I did a spell on it because he's against witchy stuff. Yeah, fair enough. That's a great idea. If you know he's gonna do, just write it into the spell that this will continue until he comes along and does this, and have that peace aspect of the spell, even maybe. I mean, annoying to me, but I see what you're talking about there. So I crafted my spells that he was like a force of nature, and if he cleaned up my candle, that it just harnesses energy and fervor to enhance my spell work. Yeah, cool. A very good idea. If I should bother loading this again, the lighter might not work for me anymore. What the heck? There we are. Yeah, I think I'm lighter this for the rest of the night. Okay. So, ordination is what we've got to. Oh, magical time. We're on magical time. Um, there's a lot to be said there, though, about especially linking up with the Sabbats and the equinoxes and solstices. These are very old, very ingrained patterns. Casting stuff on Samhain, Halloween, Samhain, whatever you want to call it, Samhain, that is in connection with that night can be extremely potent. And so can things with its opposite of Beltane. Casting things on Beltane, especially where we're asking for things for the year. And a lot of times I will connect that moment with my promise to stay up from sunset to sunrise and be drinking that whole time so that it becomes a challenge. Now, I'm not recommending that because legally, for legal purposes, I'm not saying to do that. But this has been something that many times has been very effective for me because there's the challenge of it. I'm taking on a task, keeping a fire going from sunrise from sunset to sunrise, staying awake that whole time while consuming a depressant that would tend to make one want to sleep. And keeping that going the entire night up until sunrise is the work. It is the task. It's the journey, like we talked about earlier, that you go through, keeping the fire going all night long up until sunrise, being the one to tend the fire. And once you have completed this task, then there is a thing that you were working for towards that task. And this has been very potent for me in the past. It's like taking on a challenge. Now, that if you do that, you certainly don't want to fall asleep before sunrise, because when you take on challenges like that, there's also something it's going to want if you lose the bet. Basically, what you're doing, you're making a bet with the universe. You can use annoying people into spells too. So if you know that makes trouble or interfere, you just repurpose their efforts, energy into making a spell more enhanced. Indeed, I mean that makes total sense to just go ahead and work those type of things in if you know certain things are going to happen that are annoying. Along the same vein, but kind of the opposite, when you are trying to get rid of an annoying person, like a coworker that you don't like, a lot of people will cast spells, like to make bad things happen to that person or to just make them go away in some other way. The most effective thing you can do to get rid of an annoying coworker is cast a spell for them to get a promotion or better job away from you, because they're not going to resist that. In fact, once they see it beginning to manifest, they're going to do the things to help the spell along, to get the thing that they want to, but gets you also get what you want, gets them out of there, gets them away from you. And it seems counterintuitive, but blessing your annoying coworker with better job opportunities is one of the most effective ways to get them out of your working environment. Okay, so let's see. What else do we have to talk about with magical time? I think we're yeah, he talked about something about with the sun and 22-year cycles. The last one he brought up was 1990, so I've been trying to figure out what the ones were since then. He says, "Let us hope that 1990 heralds better times on Earth." So 22 years after 1990 would be, what would that be? I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm horrible at math, and I hate to just do it in my head and be wrong. So just a second. I know it's horrible that I'm using a calculator for this. 1990 plus 22 equals, oh, 2012. Hey, what do you know? That's pretty good. Plus 22 on top of that then is 2034. I don't remember 1990 being, oh, collapse of the Soviet Union, actually. Happened in 91, but and then 2012 was an extremely significant year in many ways. I mean, it would have been more interesting if it would like hit on 2020, but I was pretty sure it wouldn't. 2012 magically was a very significant year. And then when did I say the next one was? Did I kill the calculator already? Okay, so 2012, 2012 plus 22. I think it's like 2034. Yes. Well, I want to keep our eye on 2034. It's kind of a cool number there. 2034. So yeah, maybe keep an eye on 2034. Speaking of predictions, I did that live where we were talking about um, the primaries. Have yet to see this girl that I predicted in there that would be coming out of nowhere. Well, it wasn't the primaries. The casting wasn't for the primaries. The casting was on for the actual elections in November, but I'm not seeing anyone coming out of the primaries that fits the description. So, I mean, there was that cat girl, the Palestinian girl that was running, but she lost her primary. So, if it does happen, it won't be her, apparently, unless she runs independent, which I don't think she's going to. So we're still watching for that person. See how that goes. You know, divination isn't always 100% correct. Sometimes things happen to change the timeline. Could literally be it was going to be that cat, but something else. There was other magic that interfered that kept her from winning her primary. Which there's a lot of magicians casting on politics in the United States. So I should have taken more of that into consideration when I was doing the divination, actually. I don't think it's going to light. You have to try a magic trick. Yeah, heat up the butane just a little bit inside the lighter. It makes it expand. And sometimes this will work. Not always. I mean, it's not exactly cold here, so I'm not surprised that didn't work. So, anyways, let's see. Magical timing. There are a few things I wanted to go back over in the whole thing. So let's just kind of summarize the whole bit here at the end. The massive chaos. Let me get to the beginning of the bit we were talking about. The massive chaos. Like I said, it's an interesting rite, the massive chaos. He does an invocation. He starts with preparation. And like I said, preparation is, I like that he starts with that because that is truly where a spell begins. Even with when you begin conceiving of the spell. Now, he's not talking about the creation of any spell. He's talking about a particular type of spell, the massive chaos. But it is important to understand that any spell starts the moment you start thinking about casting the spell. This is where the mental plane begins its weaving of what you will eventually manifest. This is part of it. I've seen it work out before, even for myself, where simply thinking out all the aspects of the spell and what I should do and what I need to do to make this happen was enough to make the thing wind up manifesting. And I never actually casted. I simply worked out all the different details in my mind of what I would need to do to cast the spell. And that seemed to be enough. So this time and preparation is important, and not just logistically. I'm actually kind of bad on the logistical part of this. I'm one of them horrible sorcerers that'll find themselves fumbling in a drawer for a piece of chalk or a candle mid frickin' ritual. Doesn't matter. As long as you can hold your gnosis while you're fumbling for a candle, it doesn't matter. Now, it actually does because it's pretty damn hard to hold your gnosis while you're fumbling around. I strongly suggest you get all the things you need prepared and in front of you, all the things you think you might need before you begin the spell. But if you can hold gnosis, you can get around that. I have horrible object permanence. My ADD makes it very difficult, and the fact that sometimes when I cast a spell, I've just all of a sudden the spell takes me up. Yeah. The preparation happened somewhere else. The preparation happened without my knowledge a lot of times. Sometimes it'll be things that are in a lot of times in those times, all the things I need are there. And I just suddenly get the I guess I'm casting this spell now, and all the things that I needed to do it are there and ready to go. And I just follow what is going on. I just go with the flow that is flowing through me. And some of them times I don't even know what it is I did. I just let it go. I just go with the groove and cast whatever is decided it needs to be cast. But it's important to have that flow with yourself. Like that only happens when you're connected with your fullest self, that part of you that is connected to the all thing, the audience, however you want to phrase that, connected with the self that knows what it's doing or has a that connected to that subjective sense of self outside of this particular manifestation of reality. I think that made sense. I feel like that was a bit complex. So let's try to state that one more time, even though it's way off topic. Um, in order for that type of instinct to flow properly, you need to be connected with that aspect of yourself that has a objective experience of this particular point in reality. The thing I often call the fuller self. But there are many aspects to the fuller self. And we need to be well connected to the self and to the fuller self in order to have that particular aspect that is able to have an objective viewpoint on this particular point in reality. And we do that with things like the personal sigil, which, man, I harp on that one a lot. Okay. What else did I have to say about this? He talks about statement of intent, which for any ritual is extremely important. This massive chaos didn't really have a lot of intent in and of itself. I guess basically what we're doing is using this massive chaos to cast a spell. That's why there's a statement of intent in here. And then you basically invoke chaos, and then you invoke paradox, which they use the invocation of Baphomet to essentially invoke the idea of chaos, of paradox. So you're opening the portal with invocation of chaos itself. I am the first highest that live in the first ether. I am the terror of the earth, the horns of death, pouring down on the fires of life of earth. It's a weird way to do it, but that's what he's doing is he's pulling up the energy and then he's charging the energy here and he's using the paradox actually to create the vortex. I got that the wrong way around. So he's using, I guess, chaos is the charge here, and then he's creating a portal with the invocation of Baphomet, and then ending it with "This is my will to release it." The statement of intent must be formed as simply in forcefully and precisely as possible, holding aloft any material basis that is to be used in the rite. The offering priest intones the words, "It is our will blank," adding whatever the aim of the rite is to be. So yeah, he's talking about using this massive chaos just to cast a spell. Like I found it a little confusing, really. But it's got all the bits: intent, form, charge, containment, or release, depending on how you go about the spell. He ends it with "This is my will," which is the ending of the rite. This bit it talked about at the end here is actually interesting in the exorcism sense. The closing may necessitate an exorcism of the priest if the trance or possession be deep. Any Baphometic symbols and paraphernalia are removed, and an upright pentagram is drawn over the priest. That isn't the interesting bit. A full facial lustration with cold water is administered, and he is called forth by his ordinary name until he responds. That's the asserting your presence back into your body. Remember how I talked earlier about that's the way spirits do exorcism. This is the most potent way for us to do an exorcism, and as far as forcing a presence out of the room, is by forcing our own presence out, which can be done with a personal sigil or simply with pushing your presence out. Not quite sure how to say that, but I feel like it should be intuitive. Like you feel like just pushing forth your personality, your image of self. Imagine your image of self pushing out and overpowering. You're a positive image of self, your strongest image of yourself pushing out. Okay, initiation. Initiation is intentional brainwashing. Anytime you are going through an initiation that is in a hierarchical structure, that is exactly what's happening is you are being brainwashed to be put into that structure. You should avoid any type of initiation into a hierarchical structure, in my opinion, especially if it is one that is repetitive and where you're going to be going through such an initiation or ritual on a regular basis, where you are having a jarring, discognitive moment of the self, some sort of ego death, which is then replaced by repetition or revealing of the secret inner truths of the system, followed by what did he call it? Induction into the order, which involves being told the things that you have to do in order to keep that secret. And he had the unexpected at the end here, but the unexpected and ordeal, which he had at the beginning, should be, in my opinion, be connected. And in most initiation traditions, are connected. It doesn't usually go in the order that he has placed them here, from what I can tell. That is simply how he has decided to work it. I do like that he's mentioned the general cosmic joke. If life is a joke, how can you cry? I laugh each morning as I watch the world try. What kind of jackass goes around quoting himself? That's me quoting myself. Both of those times. In saying if life is a joke, then how can you cry? I laugh each morning as I watch the world try. That is, it's a poem of mine. But also, what kind of jackass goes around quoting himself is also me quoting myself, which it's one of my favorite quotes, especially one of my favorite quotes to quote about myself. But anyways, that's enough silliness. Yeah, I feel like he got the order wrong here. The unexpected and the ordeal are the same thing. They should be connected. He talks about it with the initiatory journey, which is sending the person on a literal journey, enacting the mythology of the hero's quest. I thought that was pretty cool. He also suggests guarding a station, which in many ways reminds me of the vision quest that I have been placed in in varying degrees many times, and will still probably do again at some point. Magical defense one is silly as heck. But yeah, all initiations are brainwashing. But sometimes it's wise to wash your brain so that you can create a new one. Exorcisms. He talks I didn't like the way he divided psychology and actual possessions into work withable and unwork withable. Like I said, if someone has created a tulpa, all you gotta do is convince them that it's gone as far as a place goes. So even if there isn't really a ghost, if the people believe there's a ghost, what are you gonna do? Just walk away and let them keep believing that and keep being under the affliction of a self-created being? Or do you help them get rid of that being even though they've created it themselves? I think it's best to actually deal with it. That makes it sound like you can't. You totally can. You just got to convince the person the ghost is gone. Ghost is gone. That's how you get rid of a tulpa. Now, if it's self-aware, all you've done is destroyed its form, and it's going to have to go through a whole process if somehow it has reached a self-aware state in all of this. But it's better off dealing with that, dealing with the fact it's begun to perceive somewhere else, anyways, rather than continuing to be a self-aware created being. That can get bizarre. We will talk soon in one of the lives, probably maybe even this Saturday, about when your servitors become self-aware. Actually, yeah, this Saturday we'll talk about that. That sounds like a fun topic. When your servitors become self-aware, we'll talk about that Saturday. So, yeah, exorcisms, like I said, to me, the most powerful form of exorcism is to press your own presence out and force your presence into a room and thereby pushing their presence out of the room. Or you can't do that into a person, but you can certainly do it in a room. You can do it for yourself in your altar room. Absolutely. And you can do this inside yourself for any being that is trying to possess you. Anytime something is trying to get into you, all you have to remember is that your body, you are the one holding the steering wheel. The only way they can get a hold of the steering wheel is if you take your hands off, no matter how powerful they are, no matter how scary they are, no matter what it is they push in on you. All you have to do is refuse. The power of the word no. Non servium. I will not serve. I just really enjoy that particular phrase. And I've used it quite a bit in experiences of this nature. But it's just Latin for I will not serve. It's also an anarchist axiom. That's part of the reason I enjoy it so much. But yeah, anytime anything's trying to possess you, all you have to do is refuse. Remember that you can. No matter how scary it seems, your hands are still on the will, and it has no way to take the will from you unless you remove your hands. Okay. As far as getting a being out of someone, if it's a psychological being, this gets weird. And most importantly, do not exercise without consent. Said that many times on this live. Do not exercise without consent. And a lot of horrible, horrific things happen in this world from people trying to exorcise the demon out of someone who did not acknowledge they had a demon in them. And even with consent, it's dangerous. But you want to work within the model of the person who is being exorcised. Because all you need to do is convince them that their hands are supposed to be on the will and that this being cannot take over them, or that it has been removed. Can you convince them that their hands are on the will, or you convince them that their God's hand is on the will and that thing has been taken off, and that puts their hands back on the will. That's how exorcism works. And this works whether it is a real being or a created being. If it's a created being, though, they're going to have issues again. It's something they've created from their own trauma, their own psychology in some way. They're going to need to get that resolved. However, that is beyond our ken as a sorcerer for the most part. If you also happen to be a psychologist, more power to you. And I suggest you put an entire bunch of study into this if you happen to actually be someone who can work with the other part of it. Most of us are not. Don't exercise animals. Use wards like Black Unigriffin suggested, or use stick breaking if it is an extremely powerful connection to the animal. Rather than just using a stick breaking to use the connection, you can cut a bit of the animal's hair and use that to make a stronger link to that connection, and then break that stick. I hate to do this to you so late in the live, but gonna have to have another intermission. Be right back. Okay. I'm back. Let's see, where were we? Exorcisms, I believe. Yes. We're just kind of summarizing everything, and then we'll go to the question and answer session of the live. Okay. So, extreme unction. This is the performing last rites for the dead type things. I told a story about my grandmother. I guess it's okay to tell that intimate of stories on the lives. Like, yeah, you know, I mean, okay. Anyways, I do rather miss my grandmother still. Had a few people, quite a few people. Anyways, we're not going to get into people that have passed. I'm not going to suddenly start getting sad here. Um, so extreme unction, giving people their last rites. You can do this in many ways. If there's someone who was into it, you can help them by visualizing the S1 or the is and telling them about it if you want, someone that's into that kind of thing. At the moment of passing, that's what I suggest is going to the S1 sigil or directly to your own dream platform. If it's someone that doesn't have any of these experiences, isn't regularly used to doing magic, summoning a psychopomp is probably the best way to go. Yeah. Especially if there's one that you have a good connection with that can lead them to the S1 sigil or lead them to wherever. I mean, most psychopaths aren't going to lead them to the S1 sigil. A lot of them are going to want to lead. That's the thing about summoning psychopomp. A lot of them are going to want to lead them to whatever afterlife they take people to. So you're going to want to have some kind of an understanding there with whatever psychopomp you choose. You could also, using the is, open a portal to the S1 and even kind of force their spirit there if you so chose. But it kind of goes against the spirit of what's going on at the S1 sigil if you're forcing them there against their will. So if it's just forcing them there because they need that extra force, they need that push, this could work out well. But if you're literally trying to prevent someone from going to the afterlife they want to go to using the is as they're passing, well, at the very least, that's going to damage your own reputation with the horde, right? I would think. I don't know. That's like because you're forcing them into a free will position, but it's still forcing someone against their will. That's it. It'd be weird. I don't know how that would work out. Were this to be brought up in relation to your reputation amongst all the horde and all that. But if you're not a horde member, I don't know if that would really matter. If you care about your reputation amongst them. Using the S1 sigil, it kind of matters, I suppose, because a lot of them there. That's, anyways, yeah. Moral implications of it all is, I would suggest if you summon a psychopomp, that you do one that is going to put them in a place like they did for my grandmother, where put them in a place where they can make that decision on their own as to where it is they want to go. They can take a look around. And, you know, a lot of a lot of people choose not to go even in the last moment. Like my grandpa, he died basically Mormon. Like he was basically a Mormon when he died. But I know that old dude didn't wind up in the Mormon heaven because, well, everybody had dreams about him. And my cousin, who passed not long after, and not the cousin I was talking about before. Yeah, this was a different cousin. She, just before she passed, she had a dream that he was coming to get her, so they could go space tripping through the cosmos. Like he would take her and like, yeah, check it out, man. We're gonna go smoke it out. We're gonna go smoke out, or we're checking out Pluto and stuff. Because as much as I just said my family was Mormon, that part of my family was also. Now this is weird, but more my Utah family, I'm like third, fourth generation pot smoker of all things, right? Like my great grandpa, it skipped him, but my grandpa's grandpa was smoking the reefer even, and then my grandpa didn't, or my great grandpa didn't, or my grandpa's dad didn't. He was hardcore Mormon, and then my grandpa did, and my mom did, and I do, and that's my Utah line, which is wild. But that's how it works out. Anyways, that's way off the subject of unction, which Okay. So and then ordination. And this is just, yeah, getting really just other people around you agree that you're a castmate. Who cares? Like the guy in the last live that said, I wasn't very professional to be drinking alcohol in my life. Professional? Who's a professional? I mean, yeah, I do readings and stuff for people, but I'm certainly not trying to be professional right now. We're doing a book club. This is my social time. I'm still interacting with my friend who passed in January 2024. We're bonded. I guess he's the only one I really trust. Yeah. My nanny, which is what I call my grandmother on my dad's side. My mom's the Mormon side. My dad's side's the Hungarian and Native American and all that stuff. But my nanny, I loved her very much when she was alive. To be clear, but I went from least favorite to most favorite grandson during her life. She was a mean. She was a very blunt, very forceful woman, and you knew exactly where you stood with her. So that's how I know I went from least favorite to most favorite by the time she died, just by being myself the whole time. But either way, um, her passing was significantly different because I had made a gourd for her, a bodvi, and I made it long before she passed, and she knew that she was going to be connected to the gourd. But also, I made it to pull in the energy from her kidneys and keep her alive as long as possible, and that energy was pulling into her. And then when she passed, I put some of her ashes into the gourd and it immediately came to life. And our relationship was never better. I wasn't able to bring that gourd here. And that's actually kind of sad to me. But she's in a good position there. And yeah, I mean, she passed, but she's still a part of my life very often because she has that anchor point, which is kind of outside of the realm of what we're talking about with unction. But there are other ways to deal with uh with someone's passing. There are ways to inflate their Ka spirit just like you would with any other Ka, especially through their ashes. And that creates a part of their spirit. But when you do that, you can also give that person's actual soul, their actual being, a form to interact with you through. Yeah. You're not messing with their reincarnation. You're not pulling their actual soul into the Bodhi by reinflating their etheric form, I guess is what they would call it in here. Their aura, their call spirit. You're not pulling on their fullest self when you do that, but they can re-access it to interact with you on that full of a level once you have given them that form to inhabit. Okay, so we've talked about ordination. I think at this point we have reached the question and answer portion of the live. Thank you to all of you that have stuck with me this far. I really appreciate you being with me here. Like I said, on Saturday, we're going to go live again, 8:30 again, same time as today when today's live started. I know that's a bit late for some of y'all, but just the way my life goes, I don't. If I tried to do it earlier than that, y'all would wind up waiting for me a lot, and I'd probably not be able to do the live as often. There'd be a lot more like posting, I'm not gonna be able to do it. This happened or that happened. So it has to be this time. But yeah, this Saturday we're gonna talk about servitors again and what happens when servitors become self-aware and what to do about that. This lighter's completely boned. It's just not gonna work. So yeah, let's see. We got Mr. Spins back here. I said the name at least once on accident on the last live. Be doing some more with him. That is a spirit that is intended to become. He's one that is intended to become self-aware in a way. When you're making really complex beings, it's best to just go ahead and accept that they're going to become self-aware at some point. Like Manatellu, one of my longest and most evolved beings, he is definitely self-aware. He's strong enough that even with you knowing all of his origin points, you wouldn't be able to take over him. Now, there is one of the things about being a created being, and why even if a tulpa that's been created by people believing in a ghost, if it's gotten to the point of being self-aware, it's better off to have its form abolished and its presence become aware somewhere else. Because anything that is a created being and is still in its form from a created being, unless things have been worked out to make sure that that is not possible, you can, with the proper understanding of its creation, take over that being and essentially use it like a wearable tulpa, which can be quite frustrating if the being is self-aware. But like I said, there are ways to deal with that and make sure that isn't the case, even if it isn't a even if it isn't removed from that form. Like Manatellu, he'll probably maintain that as his form, but we have cut those things. I can't force Manatellu to do anything at this point. And where he's to be an entirely independent being, that's important. That I can't force his will. But it's also a decision to be made when you're making a being. Anyways, that's next week's live. Doesn't look like there's many more questions on concerning Psychonaut and the chapters we read today. So yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and call it for the night. All right. Well then, right blessings. Oh, again, thank you all of you that have made it this far, sticking with me this whole time. It's been a lot of fun. I am really enjoying these lives. Glad we're starting to get a little bit of a community going in here. Yes, good night, Black Unigriffin. I do want to make sure I plug my stuff at least once. If you want to be a member of the channel, for 99 cents a month, you get some cool emojis. I don't know what else to say there. I promised myself I'd plug it at least once. There you go. There's my plug. Okay, so bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.